Okay. Battlemaster David chewed the ends of his mustache as he frowned at the plan outlined on the sand table. I don't know, Holt, he said doubtfully. It's very risky. One of the first principles of water is never to split your forces. Warfare is to never split your forces, Holt nodded. He knew the knight's criticism was intended to be constructive, not simply negative thinking. It was Sir David's role to find any faults in the plan and weigh them against its possible advantages. That's true, the ranger replied, but it's also true that surprise is a powerful weapon. Baron Tyler walked around the table, considering the plan from another viewpoint. He pointed with his dagger at the mass of green that represented the thorn tree forest. You're sure you and Gillian can guide a large cavalry force through the thorn tree? I thought nobody could get through there, he asked dubiously, and Holt nodded. The rangers have charted and surveyed every inch of the kingdom for years, my lord, he told the baron, especially the parts people think there's no way through. We can surprise this northern force. Then Morgoth will be caught out as well when no Scandinavians turn up behind us. Tyler continued to pace around the table, staring intently at the design drawn there and the markers set in place in the sand map. All the same, he said, will be an itty scrape if the Scandinavians defeat Holt and the cavalry over here in the north. After all, you'll be outnumbered almost 2-1. Holt nodded agreement again. That's true, but we'll catch them in open country, so we have the advantage. And don't forget, we'll be taking 200 archers and units as well. They should even the numbers a little. An archer unit consisted of 2 men, 1 archer and 1 accompanying pikeman, mutually supporting each other. Against lightly armored infantry, they were a deadly combination. The archers could cut down large numbers of the enemy at a distance. Once the battle got to close quarters, the pikemen took over, allowing the archers to withdraw to safety, but insisted Baron Tyler's let's assume that the Canadians do manage to win through. Then the tables will be turned. We'll be fighting a real enemy in the northwest, with our rear exposed to Morgoth's wargles coming out of the pass. Harold managed to suppress a sigh. As a strategist, Tyler was notoriously cautious. On the other hand, he said, doing his best to keep the impatience out of his voice, if Holt succeeds, it will be his force that Morgoth sees coming round from the northwest. He'll assume it's the Canadians attacking us from the direction, and he'll bring his forces out onto the plains to attack us from behind, and then we'll have him, once and for all. The prospect seemed to appeal to him. It's still a risk, Tyler said stubbornly. Holt and Errol exchanged a glance, and the Baron's shoulders lifted slightly in a shrug. Holt said in a dry tone, all warfare has a risk attached to it, sir. Otherwise it would be easy. Baron Tyler looked up again at him. Holt met his gaze evenly. As the Baron opened his mouth to say something, Sir David forestalled him, smacking one gauntlet into his palm in a decisive gesture. All right, Holt, he said, I'll put your plan to the king. At the mention of the king, Holt's face softened slightly. How is His Majesty taking the news? He asked, and Sir David shrugged unhappily. Personally, he's devastated, of course. It was the cruelest possible blow to have his hopes raised and then shattered again, but he's managed somehow to put his personal life to one side and continue to perform his duties as king. He sails to mourn later, when this is all over. There may be no need for mourning, Errol put in, and David smiled sadly at him. I've told him that, of course. He says he'd prefer not to have false hopes raised once more. There was an awkward silence in the tent. Tyler, Fergus, and Sir David felt deep sorrow for their king. Duncan was a popular and just monarch. Holt and Baron Arnold, on the other hand, both felt the loss of Will deeply. In a remarkably short time, Will had become an integral part of Castle Redmond. Finally, it was Sir David who broke the silence. Gentlemen, perhaps you might begin preparing your orders. I'll take this plan to the king. And as he turned away the inner section of the pavilion, the barons and Holt left the large tent. Harold, Fergus, and Tyler walked quickly away to prepare movement orders for the army. Holt, seeing a dejected figure in Ranger green and grey watching by the sentry post, moved down the small hill to talk to his former apprentice. I want leave to go across the fissure after them, said Gillen. Holt knew how deeply he felt the hurt of Will's loss. Gillen blamed himself for leaving Will alone in the hills of Celtica. No matter how many times Holt and the other rangers told him that he had taken the right course, he refused to believe it. Now Holt knew it would hurt him even more to be refused. Nevertheless, as rangers, their first duty was to the kingdom. He shook his head and answered curtly, Not granted. You're needed here. We're to lead a force through the four thorn trees to cut off horsemen. Go to Crowley's tent and get hold of the chart showing the secret ways for this part of the country. Gillen hesitated, his jaw set, but he began to protest, and then something in Holt's eyes stopped him as the older ranger leaned forward. Gillen, do you think for one moment that I don't want to tear that plateau apart stone by stone until I find Will? But you and I took an oath when they gave us these silver oak leaves, and now we have to live up to it. Gillen dropped his eyes and nodded. His shoulders slumped as he gave in. All right, he said in a broken voice, and Holt thought he saw traces of tears in his eyes. He turned away hurriedly before Gillen could see the moisture in his own. Get the charts, he said briefly. Okay, well, thank you for listening to me read chapter 28. It was a pretty short chapter. If you'd like to listen to me read chapter 29, then please stay tuned. Thank you. Bye-bye.